Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and good afternoon, dear children. I would like to take your class regarding the poem of John Keats' Ode to the Nightingale. Now, I'm taking this class especially because I love to recite this poem and I am very, very fond of it, and I'm sure you all are also going to be very, very fond of this particular poem. You all know that John Keats is a romantic poet. Like Wordsworth and Shelley, he's also a romantic poet. And the most important part of John Keats' life is that his poetic career was the shortest amongst all of them. And in fact, for a period or span of 4 years only. And this poem, Ode to Nightingale, was written in 1819, and John Keats was noted as a writer of odes. In this particular poem, the theme of most of the odes of John Keats is what? That life is transient and art is permanent. And in this poem, also, he's talking about the transience of life and about the song of the nightingale, which is almost an art form. Now, the song of the nightingale continues to live for ages and ages. It is not something which dies out or which is momentarily short lived, but it will continue to enchant the people since ancient times, middle times, and middle ages, as well as the present times. Now, in this particular poem, John Keats is enchanted by the song of the nightingale, and he wants to capture that song because it gives him great happiness. And everybody wants happiness in life. What is eternal in life? Eternal in life is peace and happiness. And this is what Keats wanted to capture in his life. He begins the poem by saying, "My heart aches, and a drowsy numbness pains my sense, as though of hemlock I had drunk, or emptied some dull opiate to the drain." No, see, he says, "My heart aches." And if you take it literally, why your heart aches? Because you feel as if you are tortured, you are troubled, you are suffering from some problem. But here the heart aches because of the song of the, he's so enamored by the beauty of the song. And the nightingale, he says, as if 1 minute passed and Leitward had sung, "'Tis not through the envy of that." He says, as if I have drunk of hemlock. Now, what is a hemlock? Hemlock is one of the roots that you find in the forest and which has the effect of almost like an opium, like a drug. So he feels, and when you get intoxicated by drinking of hemlock, you get intoxicated. So when you get intoxicated, naturally you tend to forget the world, isn't it? You are not in your senses. And this is what happens with Keats. He feels that because he is so feeling so happy with the song of the nightingale, he feels as if I have drunk some hemlock. And because of the drinking of, or rather, the taking of that hemlock, he has lost his senses, or emptied some dull opiate to the drain, or either he has become overdrunk by drinking too much of wine, too much of liquor, and as if 1 minute passed Leithwards. Leithwards is the underworld, the river of the underworld, as if he has gone into the underworld, that is, he's lost his senses, he's not in his present state of mind, he's not in the present world, but as if he has gone into the past, as if he has gone underworld, he's become forgetful. And it is not, it is why he is feeling that, it is not because of the envy of thy happy lot, envy, that he's not feeling envious because the place where the nightingale, the small dryad, he says this, he says, "'Tis not the envy of thy happy lord, but being too happy in thy happiness." He says in the poem, being too happy in thy happiness. That means he's partaking that happiness, he's enjoying that moment, he's getting, when that dryad, that single dryad, flitting from place to place, from tree to tree, he says that this light winged dryad, he calls the nightingale as the light winged dryad, who is flitting from tree to tree, is singing in some melodious plot. That is, it is not only that she is singing in that one particular spot or one particular place, but the whole spot, whole area, that whole garden seems to be reverberating with the music of that song. So the whole plot, that whole place has become so melodious because of the song. And he wants to fly and go there and be in that spot in order to enjoy the beauty of the song. And then in the second stanza, he says that I feel, oh, for a draught of vintage that had been cooled a long age in the deep delved earth, tasting of flora and the country green, dance and provincial song and sana. Now, in the second stanza, he wants to take the help of, because after, I mean, in the first stanza, when he feels as if I have drunk some hemlock and I've become intoxicated, and then he comes out of his senses, into back into his senses. In the second stanza, he wants to take the help of artificial wine. So, as if he, oh, for a draught of vintage, that is, I want a cup full of wine. And this wine of the warm south of France, that is from the province. That the province is a state in France, which is famous for its grapes and for its wine. And he wants to taste the wine of that warm south and fill, and he wants his cup to be filled right up to the brim, that is right to the top, and the beaded bubbles that are there on the glass. And those beaded bubbles, because of the wine, the bubbles come out and then they pass out. So those beaded bubbles, they are in a way winking at him, winking because they are being mischievous, and in fact, as an acting as an indication to Keats, as if he want, by drinking that vintage, he is going to again go into the world of forgetfulness, and he will forget his present state of torture, and not torture, I wouldn't say torture, but his present state of depression. And in fact, he is going to enjoy the beauty of the song. He will become forgetful of the world, and he will get happiness in the joy of the song of the nightingale. Now, in the third stanza, he says that fade far away, dissolve and quite forget what thou among the leaves have never known, the weariness, the fever, and the fret. Now he says, fade far away. Now these words are very important. Fade far away. That is, when you are in a state of depression, when you are in a state of anxiety, when you are tortured by the trials and tribulations of the life, you want to run away. You want to forget yourself. You want to escape. Now, fade far away is a term which is, showing an escapist attitude. And from what you want to escape? You want to escape from the fever and the fret of the world. The fever and the fret is the indication of the problems, the privations, the tribulations that you are facing in life, isn't it? You want to forget that. So he says that I want to fade far away in order to forget that fever and the fret of the world, he says. And why? Because this fever and the fret of the world is here upon this earth where the men sit and hear each other groan. That is what is happening in this worldly life. We are all materialistic, and we are all trying to satisfy ourselves by encompassing the wealth, power, and fame which everybody yearns for in life. And everybody is sitting and groaning because of some problem or the other. And he even refers to his brother Tom, who died very young, when he says, when palsy shakes a few sad last gray's hair, where youth grows pale and spectre sin and dies, where but to think is to be full of sorrow and leaden eyed despair. Now, this is a reference to his brother Tom, who died very early. And that is why he says that the death and suffering, there is no end to it. And when you lose your own one, naturally you suffer the mental losses, and you do not get that peace of mind. And at the same time also refers, when beauty cannot keep her lustrous eyes, or new love pine at them beyond tomorrow. This is a reference to Fanny, because he very much loved Fanny and he wanted to marry her, but she was unfaithful to him. And his love life was also not successful. So even love fades away, even love pines away, and beauty cannot keep her lustrous eye. So all these things, death, love, all these things tend to give pain to John Keats. And that is why he wants to forget the world. He wants to run away from the tribulations of the world. He wants to escape. And where he wants to escape? He wants to escape into the world of the nightingale. And then he says, how can I go? How can I capture the happiness of the nightingale? How can I capture the happiness of that song of the nightingale? So, in the fourth stanza, he takes the help of imagination, because he says that away, away, for I fly to thee, he says, not charioted by Bacchus and his parts, but on the viewless wings of poesy. Now, poesy is imagination, fantasy. So not, and not charioted by Bacchus. Bacchus is the god of wine, who is charioted by parts of leopards. But he says, I do not want to be carried into that world of nightingale with the help of wine, but I want to fly into that world with the help of my imagination. He says, I want to fly on the viewless, because naturally, imagination and is view. I mean, if you are carried away by the air, natural air is invisible. And if you are being carried away in your world of fantasy on the viewless wings of poesy, that means your imagination can create many things. It can really carry you to any other world, a world which is simply more beautiful, more profound, more lovely than the present world, he says. And therefore, he says, though the dull brain perplexes and retards, already with thee, he says, tender is the night, and happily the queen moon is on her throne, clustered around by her starry face, but here there is no light, save from what heaven is, with the breezes blown through verdurous glooms and winding mossy ways. Now, with the help of the imagination, he wants to enter into that particular spot where the nightingale is singing. And you cannot see the nightingale because she is hidden among the verdurous gloom of the trees and the branches. And save for the light, that one ray of moonlight, which is entering through that greenery, through the passage of those trees, through the leaves, that ray of light, that moonlight that is entering, and it's spotting upon that nightingale that is sitting there on the tree and singing in full throated ease. So I want to enter into that world. I want to reach that particular spot. And how can I reach? I can only reach it with the help of my imagination. No Bacchus and no chariot can carry me to that world of the nightingale, but I want to go, I want to enter that world, because that is the moment of happiness. That is the eternal happiness that I want to capture in my life. And then in the next stanza, he describes the spring season, where he describes all the flowers. He says, I cannot see what flowers are at my feet, he says, not what soft incense hangs upon the boughs, but in embalmed darkness, guess each sweet wherewith seasonal month endows the grass, the thicket, and then fruit tree wild, white hawthorn, and the pastoral eglantine, fast fading violets, covered up in leaves, and mid-May's eldest child. So there's a mid-May season, the spring season, almost coming towards the summer season. And at that time, I mean, he cannot see, it is dark. So in that darkness, he cannot see the flowers. But with the help of the incense, with the help of the fragrance, he can feel the presence of those flowers. Eglantine, hawthorn, musks, everything he can feel. He can feel the incense of all these flowers that are lying at his feet and which are surrounding that particular area where the nightingale is singing. But he says, the murmurous haunt of flies on summer eves. Dark murmur, and at the same time, I can also hear the murmuring of the flies that are flitting on the flowers, he says. This flitting of the flies from flower to flower, I can hear the murmur sound also. And then he says, darkling I listen. And he calls the bird darkling. Darkling because he cannot see, but at the same time, because due to the invisibility also, he can at least hear the song of the nightingale. He says, darkling I listen, And for many a time, I've been half in love with easeful death. Now, this is a very, very important sentence. I've been half in love with easeful death. Easeful death, that is, everybody does not want to die in pain. Everybody wants to have an easy death, an easy life, and an easy death. And he says, this is the right moment which I want to capture and die because I'm feeling enamored, I'm over raptured with the beauty of the song. The song lilts that music, that peace, that harmony in my mind, that this is the right moment which I want to capture and I want to die at this particular moment. So I'm half in love. He says, I wish I could end my life at this time. For he says, called him soft names in many a mused rhyme. He says, called him soft names. Who? Death. I have celebrated death in many of my poems. I have written many rhymes, many mused rhymes in my poems about death. But this is the right time. I want to capture death, he says, to take into the air my quiet breath. But I'm invoking death. I'm pleading death to come to me and take my life away, take my breath away. I want to die at this moment. Now more than ever seems it rich to die. Now, this is the right time. This is the correct time I want to die. This is the richest moment. I'll feel most happy, as if I've attained bliss in life. This is the happiest moment I want to enrich my life, he says, to seize upon the midnight with no pain. And at this time, this in the darkness, when I'm listening to the song of the nightingale, among the verdurous bloom with the flower, with the incense of the flowers all around me, isn't it? And the flies moving, murmuring of the flies from flower to flower. This is the right moment I want to capture. And he says, I and this he says now more than ever seems it rich to die, to seize upon them. And to seize means to stop my life, to seize upon the midnight with no pain. I will die an easy death, he says, while thou art pouring forth thy soul abroad in such an ecstasy, while the nightingale keeps on singing, pouring her very soul she's pouring out. The poet says she's pouring out her very soul, and in ecstatically. I mean, ecstasy is that moment of extreme happiness, and I want to capture that extreme happiness. He says, when you are pouring out your soul into the song, I want to capture that moment. He says, still wouldst thou sing? And I have years in vain. And he says, even though if I die, the song will not end. The song will not come to an end. You will continue to sing. He says, too, and thou was not born for death, because he tells the bird. Now, see, he calls the word bird thou. Thou is God. So here the bird becomes an art form, eternal being, because the bird was not born for death. And what? Of course, the body of the bird will die. Nightingales will come and go. Life will move on and on. One nightingale will come and die, and the other will be born, and she will also die. So that will consume the body of the nightingale. But the song of the nightingale will become eternal. So thou was not born to die, meaning to say the nightingales, the song of the nightingale is the eternal song which will never end in life because she is an immortal bird. Now, when he calls the bird immortal, immortal is God, infinite is God. Who is not subject to birth and death. So the bird is also not subject to death, not the physical being of the nightingale, but the song of the nightingale is immortal, he says. No hungry generation tread thee down. And he says, I'm not talking about that as if I'm in my present time, I'm hearing the song of the nightingale, but from generations to generations. In ancient times, the prince and the princess, even they were charmed by the song of the nightingale. And when he says, the voice I hear this passing night was heard in ancient days by emperors and clown. Matlab, this fascinated not only me, but also the ancient emperors and the clowns, he says, perhaps the self-same song that found the path through the sad heart of Ruth. Now, Ruth was banished from her home and she led an alien life. And in her alienation, she suffered mental losses. even she was charmed by the song of the nightingale when she was standing in the amidst the corn and feeling sick for home, when she had a longing for her own people, and when she was feeling bereaved and lonely and sad. Even the song of the nightingale at that time charmed Ruth also. She stood in tears amid the alien corn, the same that oft times had charmed magic casements, and even the magic casements, that is the magic windows, when the prince or princess were looking out of the windows, which opened or overlooked those perilous sea. Even they from a distance could hear the song of the nightingale, and they were charmed by the beauty of the song. But in fancy lands forlorn. And this was the case. I mean, his creative mind, his creative imagination, the poet's Keats' imagination is running far wide. For he says that in fairy lands forlorn, that is far away lands, in ancient times, even the princes and the clowns and the emperors, everybody was charmed by the song of the nightingale. And that very word forlorn in the last paragraphs brings him back to his own self, to reality, to the present times. But it says forlorn, that very word is like a bell. It is a bell that tolls and brings me back into this very life. Because he says to toll me back to my soul self, because I have come out of my world of imagination. When I leave my world of creativity, when I leave my world of imagination, then what happens? Then I am brought back to my present self, to this particular world. For he says, adieu. The fancy cannot cheat so well. Fancy is imagination. You cannot live in the world of fancy. Adieu, farewell, goodbye. Goodbye to fancy, goodbye to imagination. As she is famed to do deceiving elf. That is, fancy is deceiving elf. He calls her a deceiving elf because she cheats. Your imagination can cheat you. Your imagination can lead you far away, may help you to fulfill all your dreams in life. But all that is there in imagination. And when you come back to your own self, then you realize, oh, the world was fantastical. And fancy was a deceiving elf. It deceived me. He says, adieu, adieu. So goodbye, goodbye. Thy plaintive anthem fades past the near meadows, over the still stream, up the hillside, and now 'tis buried deep in the next valley glades. So adieu to the song, because that song, which I was hearing close to my ears, close to my mind, close to my heart, which is so near me, is now fast fading anthems. That is the song. The beauty of that song is fading far, far away into a distance over the mountains and entering into the valley glades. That is drowning into those valleys from where I cannot bring back to life that song of the nightingale. He says, and then he says, was it a vision or a dream? That is, was I imagining? Was it a visionary world in which I was living, thinking that I'm enjoying the happiness of the song of the nightingale? So he is questioning his own self. And fled is that music. Do I wake or sleep? So fled is that music. Music is the song. The song is the art form, the eternal thing. But that song will continue to enchant ages and ages and will continue to enchant me. But at present, when I was feeling enamored and captured by the beauty of the song, it is no more. It was just a vision or a dream. And I realize that he's questioning his own self. Do I wake or sleep? Was I living in a world of imagination, or was I trying to run away from this world of reality? So he says, you can see this poem was written in 1819, and it comes in a whole circle. It moves in a whole circle. That it begins with the drinking of the hemlock, and with the drinking of the hemlock and with the drinking of the vintage, he was trying to fade away into that world of, and with the help of poesy also, that is imagination, he was trying to fade away into the world of the nightingale, into the song of the nightingale. But last stanza brings him, after that circular motion, brings him back to earth, to this reality. So all the stanzas, they are 10 line stanzas. The first four is a quatrain, Shakespearean quatrain, and the sestus is the patriarchal sestus. And these lines, all of them, I mean, the same pattern, A, B, and C, D, E is the pattern that is used in this particular poem, Ode to the Nightingale. So, the beauty of the poem is that art is permanent and life is temporary. We cannot capture, we cannot retain anything in life, but as an art form, we want to live and capture the song of the nightingale, and that is, we want to capture happiness in our life. I hope you all have understood. And if you like the poem, then please do subscribe. Thank you so much.